So, we left off with Mr. Wyden in limbo about his proposition to clarify this Patriot Act within the Patriot Act. And we've gone through this in the previous lecture. I want to deliver a warning this afternoon. When the American people find out how their government has secretly interpreted the Patriot Act, they will be stunned and they will be angry. He wanted to reference previous abuses of such programs, highlighted here. And Mr. Udall of Colorado stated Americans would be alarmed if they knew how this law is being carried out. The update recently, a couple of days ago, is that this coming Thursday, they're going to have the Senate bill authorizing U.S. intelligence agencies' operations. A good time to contact your representative and voice your concerns. And at that point, they're going to do asked for a detailed assessment of the problems posed by the reliance of government agencies on interpretations of domestic surveillance authorities that are inconsistent with the understanding of such authorities by the public. And specifically, it will require Attorney General Holder and the Director of the National Intelligence, James Clapper, to produce a plan for addressing such problems with secret interpretations of the FISA and the Patriot Act, the government's two most important domestic spying laws. The bill, though, doesn't force them to roll back those. They've just got to basically admit they've messed up. Even if Wyden and Udall can get their colleagues to sign on to their effort, it would be naive to think the nation's top prosecutor intelligence officers so think they can't find an artful way of saying they've done anything wrong. So that's where we stand today on this matter. So, in terms of this new Pentagon Air Force wing called the Cyber Command, what we want to ask is what would be the military tactics you would use as a Defense Department entering into the militarized thinking of strategies and tactics and enemy neutralization and counterinsurgency and so forth. How would they apply it to this a new tool they have? These are not saying that they're going to do these things, but these are concepts that we can posit. Now, the first one that we've got here, propaganda blitz, is a denial of information attack. This denial of information attack could be where thousands or millions of messages are transmitted out, flooding the pipe so that you can't find the wheat from the chaff. Also making slight changes to publication and search devices. In other words, sending a file, you start finding that you're having problems sending it. It could be subtle at first, slowing down the opposition, reducing their bandwidth by subtle means of manipulation of corporate standards, such as with YouTube, changing the formatting suddenly, with Google changing their heuristics, so it's more difficult to find heuristics to show smaller articles, which is what I noticed they were doing, is that it was harder to find the relevance by date rather than their presumption of relevance, because their presumption of relevance will start with the most popular outlets, which we're least interested in because those stories get recirculated and trumpeted. What we want is a chronological list so we can see both the small and the large. An ideal heuristic would be to look at the difference of the ideas and be able to represent different ideas, which shouldn't be impossible roughly. But all these have censorship elements built into that, and gaming elements built into them. Then, of course, we have the view of somebody producing content that does not support your objectives. For example, providing a humanitarian view of the bombing of Libya could make people protest and reduce morale and expose the military to weakness. So if they have a cyberspace command, what they can do is viewing these targets in these new militarized fashions, simply content publishers. Not to say they don't do it now, but what that produces is either destruction of their infrastructure, can be due through software, through viruses, trapdoors and so forth in products, or through intimidation of the people. So in this case, we're looking at Bradley Manning in The Guardian. I haven't struck and highlighted each of the key issues here yet. It is the first time Bradley Manning has spoken publicly about his treatment. This was on March. I was stripped of all clothing with the exception of my underwear. My prescription glasses were taken away from me, and I was forced to sit in essential blindness. He was placed on suicide watch for 3 days. When he was told he was being put on suicide watch, he writes, "I became upset out of frustration. I clenched my hair with my fingers and yelled, 'What are you doing this to me? Why am I being punished? I have done nothing wrong.'" Also describes the experience of being stripped naked at night and made to stand for parade in the nude, a condition that continues to this day. The guard told me, "Stand at parade rest with my hands behind my back and my legs spaced shoulder width apart." So at parade rest for about 3 minutes. The brig supervisor and the other guards walked past my cell. He looked at me, paused for a moment, and continued the next cell. I was incredibly embarrassed at having all these people stare at me naked. Manning is in charge of multiple counts relating to the leaking of hundreds of thousands of secret U.S. government cables, videos, and war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan to WikiLeaks. The charge includes aiding the enemy, which can carry the death penalty. However, the classification levels, as I understand of the documents, would give millions of people access to these documents. So getting back to it. Accomplishing this by secret surveillance of Facebook, etc., to get the goods. So in other words, to be able to penetrate online services to develop a web of relationships and likelihoods of people's conduct. Now these are things that are already happening without a Pentagon cyberspace arm. So what one has to ask is, what are they going to do differently? What is their unique role going to be? So this is for the subject of the next episode. Now this is an example of the controversy, the NSA Warrantless. Here we are, surveillance controversy. And this is primarily dealing with the National Security Agency, which was traditionally in charge of cracking code and eavesdropping on conversations and communications. It was always vastly bigger than the other agencies once the mid-60s went underway, as far as I understand it, or grew, perhaps after that, as information technology grew. The harshness of treatment of whistleblowers is evidenced in this article, and this PowerPoint is available online. It's obviously a convenient way to simply take each assertion and hyperlink it to the underlying reference. So here, let's see here. Obama's Whistleblower War suffers 2 defeats. That's by Glenn Greenwald. And he's got an unprecedented war on whistleblowers, according to Greenwald. So I'm not going to highlight every detail of these matters.
When people tell us, no, we're not going to build it. No, America doesn't have any greatness in its future. Okay, sorry.
Severe treatment of young white American Muslim captured in Afghanistan. This is a really heartbreaking story. I'm a Bay Area guy, and I've known lots of people that were quite eccentric around here. And this guy just sounds like the typical eccentric who went on a round-the-world trip. But got caught up over there. So he went over to Pakistan. Here's a picture of him after he's been captured by U.S. troops. He went off to Pakistan. He became a Muslim. His family was supportive of it. He seemed very devout and not at all a flaky person, as the media described. Here it says, John Adal has been a good student, but his student habits improved after his conversion. He quickly immersed himself in Islamic literature and came to the conclusion he needed to learn Arabic. He went to Yemen, embarked on a rigorous course of study. He wanted to be educated in the old traditions of Islam. Then he went to continue his studies in Pakistan and wrote back, "I trust your judgment and hope you have a wonderful adventure." He arrived in Pakistan 2000, enrolled in a Quran memorization program in a madrasa. In late 2001, John wrote to me and his mother saying he planned to go to the mountains to escape the oppressive summer heat. We had no idea that he would go across Khyber Pass in Afghanistan and volunteer for the Taliban. Here the father talks about the Taliban's fight against the dreaded Northern Alliance. So the lesser of two evils was the Taliban. The Northern Alliance were committing atrocities against Muslims. And as a result, this young man volunteered, as many others did, because the Northern Alliance were the same Russian-backed insurgency. They were essentially considered people that were slaughtering Muslims at the time. They cannot, those who, like Mr. Lindh, merely fought the Northern Alliance, he wrote, cannot be deemed terrorists. Their motivation was to serve and to protect suffering Muslims in Afghanistan, not to kill civilians. And John also said, I felt I had an obligation to assist what I perceived to be an Islamic liberation movement against the warlords who were occupying several provinces. I learned from books, articles, and individuals with first-hand experience of numerous atrocities committed by the Northern Alliance against civilians. I heard reports of massacres, child rape, torture, and castration. So put yourself in this guy's place. I mean, how many people do you know who've done that kind of a very intense course of studies? We can't examine him to see how he came out, but he invested a lot of time in improving himself in his own way, and he traveled to Afghanistan and felt morally compelled to serve. It's completely consistent with his life story. It's been a story of service, and all religions espouse love, and then the practitioners are the problem. The brutal human rights violations committed by the Northern were indeed thoroughly documented in the U.S. They include massacres, rape of women and children, torture, and castration. His impulse was to help. Then a prison breakout occurred. So I'll speed this up. The U.S. handled him horrendously when he got caught. They almost killed him, I would say. He went through the most horrific siege of a prison where it was shelled. He was left for dead, floating in cold water in a bombed-out basement that stunk of carcasses. And one American CIA agent or something similar was killed there, and so they went nuts on him. And here it is. Who brought you here? You believe in what you're doing that much? You want to be killed here? The problem is he's got to say if he wants to live or die. This is an American. Die here. We're just going to leave him, and he's going to fucking sit in prison the rest of his fucking short life. It's his decision, man. We can only help the guy who wants to talk to us. We can only get the Red Cross to help so many guys. I think it was apparent that Span Tyson were American agents, but because they were in the company of Dostum's forces, unaccompanied by American troops, it was not safe for John to talk to them. So the Northern Alliance had gotten into the prison. They meant business when they said John might be killed by Dostum. The Red Cross could only help so many guys. John was extreme peril at that moment, and he knew it. He was returned the main body of prisoners. There was an explosion on near the basement. Two prisoners grabbed the guard's weapon. It was then that Span did a Rambo. As the remaining guards ran away, Span flung himself to the ground, began raking the courtyard, and his prisoners, 5 or 6, jumped on him, and he disappeared beneath a heap of bodies. His body was recovered. They turned their weapons on the 400 bound prisoners, killing or severely wounding scores of them. Some prisoners tried to sit and run. They were gunned down with slaughter. John tried to run, but he was shot in the right thigh. He fell to the ground. He pretended for 12 hours he was dead. More air raids were staged the next day. A massive 2,000-pound bomb was dropped. It was hard to take it all in. The dead in various parts of the dead turned up wherever you looked, in thickets of willows and poplars and waterlogged ditches and storage rooms piled with ammunition dumps. They had a sustained effort to kill the Taliban survivors who remained there. They used grenades. They dropped them down air ducts. RPGs were fired directly in the basement. John received shrapnel wounds in his shoulder, back, ankle, and calf. He had a bullet still lodged in his thigh. At one point, fuel was poured down the air ducts and a fire was ignited in which some fuel-drenched prisoners were burned to death. John, choking on the black smoke, lost consciousness. He woke with the taste of gasoline in his mouth and a loud explosion in the hall as more rockets and grenade ricocheted. They flooded the basement with cold water. John braced himself on a stick and a fellow soldier for the next 24 hours to avoid drowning in the waste. Okay, so at any rate, on December 1st, which happens to be my birthday, the Red Cross arrived at the fortress, and the survivors, who for several days had been trying to surrender, were finally allowed to exit the basement. When they emerged into the bright sunlight, they encountered a confusing horde of journalists. So let's move on here.